Hello, my name is Kaylee Bohm. I'm a professional psychic, and today I would like to share with you the story of how I called in and manifested my ultimate light worker soulmate, my husband of 11 years now. We've been married since 2013. And the story begins with my life, obviously, prior to meeting him. His name is Kevin. I didn't date in high school. I had my first serious boyfriend around the age of 19. We dated on and off from 19 to 23. And when I was 23, we got married. However, it was a pretty traumatic few weeks of marriage, and it ultimately didn't work out. He left. I didn't have a lot of closure or understanding of what was happening. Though later on, I understood what had happened, and I won't go into the details to respect his privacy. But after that experience, I was obviously very heartbroken, but I was also very confused as to why it was happening. And as I was going through the annulment process, I felt very alone in that process. I also didn't really want to open myself up and share what I was going through with other people. I was pretty shut down. I was living in a new city that I had only lived in for about a year at that point. And so I started a job at a new place, and I didn't really share what I was going through or what had happened to me with my coworkers. But one day a coworker and I were walking down the street together, and he ran into an acquaintance of his, a friend of his. And so he introduced me to this friend of his, and they exchanged pleasantries and chatted for a bit. And then as the individual that he introduced me to was leaving, he looked at me and he reached out to shake my hand and say goodbye, nice to meet you. And as we're locking eyes and he's shaking my hand, he says, "Someday you will meet someone. They will not need you, and it will be the greatest relationship of your life." And I was shocked. I wasn't expecting that from a random stranger. And so I also was like so impacted by this, because I knew that this person didn't know me from Adam, but I also had never shared or disclosed anything that I was going through with my coworkers. So it's not like it could have gotten around to him. And so I just was very blown away. And so I never forgot his face or his name, just because he became known to me as my sidewalk prophet, and it was really impactful for me. This idea of someone not needing me was very foreign to me. I was someone who really, now I understand, had a very codependent nature due to, anxious attachment disorder, always wanting to be of service, fix, do, serve other people. So I wasn't aware of those aspects of myself at that time, but him saying this was very, almost allowed for me to have an awakening to that fact of like, what do you mean someone who doesn't need me? What do you mean it would be the greatest relationship of my life? And so I shared what happened to me with a physician that I worked with and worked for at the time. And I was like, I had the craziest experience. This random stranger looked me in the eye and said I'd meet a man one day that didn't need me and it would be the greatest relationship of my life. What do you think that means? And she said, well, yeah, it's pointing out that you look for men, or you only spend time with men, or have only ever really dated this one person, and it was a very codependent in nature relationship dynamic where you felt needed, therefore you were in the relationship, but was your heart really in it, and was it an appropriate, healthy relationship? And so I was like, okay, so what do I do with this? And she said, date a lot of different type of people. Don't put, that first foot forward of like, what can I do for you? How can I incorporate myself in your life? And so she gave me some really great counsel. And so I obviously wasn't ready to get into a relationship at that point. The annulment process was pretty lengthy, and my heart was broken, and it just was a lot at that time in my life. But I I decided that I would go on like a self-help, self-healing, self-awakening journey, and I would allow for myself to meet new people. I was living in a new city, and to engage with people, not just, dates and romantic partners, but really just with people in a new way. Because as you may know, with codependency, it runs deep. It's not just, oh, I'm codependent with my romantic partners. There's an element of having that experience in your platonic relationships, your friendships, your community, your family. And obviously, codependency is typically rooted in family dynamics, childhood family dynamics. So I set out on, having this new mantra of like, people don't have to need me, and I can show up in their life and they can show up in my life, and we could just share time together. So that set me on a completely new path, a path that was uncharted for me prior. And so I had a wonderful time, meeting new people in the city, going to new places, having different types of conversations, going on dates with different people. I did end up, dating, having, dating certain people, a few people, a few months at a time throughout, I would say like a year and a half time frame. And with each relationship, I was able to make decisions based on, was my heart in this, and was it a complementary composite energy between us, or again, was I just fulfilling a need to be needed? And so the second individual that I was dating, I ultimately realized, this isn't a relationship I should be in any longer. And so I broke it off, and I was feeling really good. For the first time in my life, I was only 24 at the time, so granted, that's still very young. But I had been raised in a culture and a religion where people get married extremely young, like late teens, early 20s. And so for me to be 24 and have had a failed, 3-week marriage, there was definitely a lot of, self-inflicted shame and embarrassment, and just confusion of like, why did this happen to me? All of my siblings and all of my community, they found their person, they're married. And so again, I realized it's very young, and there was plenty of time, but it was very invigorating for me to reach a place where I was just happy and I was content, and I wasn't needing to search. And that wasn't just a part of my story, having been raised in a culture that promoted, marrying young. It was also really, it was a new concept for me to understand as someone who struggled with those elements of codependency, of like, oh, I can feel good on my own, and I can complete myself on my own. And so it was a really great time. Well, it was only about 2 weeks later, of 2 weeks of feeling that good energy, breaking it off with this guy, feeling really good, that I was driving home. And if you've watched previous videos, around this time, I was a colon hydrotherapist. I worked as a digestive health specialist at a naturopathic medical clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was my ultimate dream job. Spirit led me to this dream job. It was just wonderful. So this was contributing to being the happiest I've ever been in my life thus far. So I had a great job. My health was on track. I was enjoying meeting new people, dating people. So I was in a good place. And I felt even more empowered and invigorated by, saying, peace be with you to this guy, and saying like, I'm going to be single. I'm going to be alone for a while. Well, I'm driving home one day, and my higher self, my intuition, comes in really strong and says, you need to quit your job. And it came in like a ton of bricks, and I felt it so strong, but I immediately started sobbing because, again, this was my dream job, and I had no inclination that this would be happening. Like there was no like reason why I should quit my job. no reason at all. And so I was very confused. And I remember calling my dad and saying, this, sharing with him this prompting, this like message that was coming through to me. I was raised in a household that supported, receiving messages like this and heeding them. And so I just remember my dad saying like, yeah, you gotta follow your intuition. So I called my boss, scheduled an appointment for, I think this was on a Friday. I scheduled the appointment for like first thing Monday morning, and I met with her and I gave her my 2 weeks, and I was like, I don't know why, but I'm quitting. And she was very, open and very spiritual, and so she understood that I was heeding the call of my higher self. And but she said, well, maybe we can work something out to where you can still do something for the practice, but I would like you to reconsider and I would like you to stay. And so I was like, I don't know, but I just know I'm supposed to quit, and I know that I'm supposed to do something else. And during that time frame, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm out living on my own as a single woman and I no longer have a job, like I have to leave. I have to go back and be with family. So I purchased a one-way ticket to stay with family in Alaska, and I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to Washington State or where I was going to go after that, but I was at least going to go and spend the spring and summer in Alaska with family. And so I purchased a one-way ticket home. I sold nearly all of my belongings that I had accumulated over the few years that I lived in Arizona. Again, I quit my job, and then I got out of my lease. And so it was just like boom, 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 like going really quickly. So within this last, within the first week of my 2 weeks notice, my boss said, hey, as you know, I've been working with this business coach for many years. I'd love for you to meet with me and the business coach to one, kind of report everything that you've done for the practice, because in addition to being a colon hydrotherapist, I had done quite a bit of consulting for the business and management of the medical practice and helped her grow her practice and her business. And so she said, okay, you can report everything you've done, and as well as maybe we can spitball some ideas of how you can continue to work for us and with us. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll meet with you guys. So it was a Friday afternoon, and we all met at a Barnes and Noble, and we were, chatting, talking shop for a couple hours. And then after the few hours, the business coach looked at me and he said, what kind of guys do you date? And my boss and I were just kind of like, what? Because this business coach is like super professional the entire time, very professional, like not, it just was out of left field for both of us. And I just remember seeing my boss's eyes just go like as wide as mine. And so I made a joke. I think I even said like the wrong ones or something like that. And so he laughed and he's like, no, seriously, what kind of guys do you date? Like, who are you interested in? And I was like, what, why? And so my boss then said, who are you trying to set her up with? Because he was, a married man with children. And so she's like, who are you trying to set her up with? And he said, my brother. And I just remember my boss looking at me then after he said that, and she goes, oh, you're going to marry him. And I was just like, okay, that's crazy. Like, not only it was just, the whole thing was very shocking. And so then I remember looking back at the business coach, and his face was almost kind of like we don't need to, okay, ladies, we don't need to escalate things. But we all kind of laughed, and he was like, well, let me get your number. And I think I even resisted again. I said, hey, I literally sold all my stuff, got out of my lease, quit my job. I have a one-way ticket to Alaska. Like, why would I get your brother? Like, why would I give you my number? And he said, I think you guys have a lot in common, so you guys could just be pen pals. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So I give him my phone number, and we, close up the meeting, pretty quickly and say our goodbyes. And as my boss and I are walking out, we wanted to grab dinner together. And so we're walking out, and as we're walking out, my phone rings. And I look at my phone, and it's a phone number I don't recognize, and I answer it, and I hear a voice say, "Hi, I was just sent your phone number." And as soon as I heard his voice, it was over. It was over. I have never felt like that in my entire life. I remember pulling the phone away, covering the microphone, and looking over at my boss, and I go, "You're right, I'm going to marry him." And then putting my face back to the phone and saying, "Yeah, hi." And then he was like, "Yeah, my brother just texted me your phone number, and he said, we'd have a lot in common and we should get together." And he asked me out for, that Friday night. So this was a Friday afternoon. He asked me out for Friday night, and I just remember going to dinner with my boss and us just being like, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?" And we were just like giggling and laughing, and it was just like, it was such a mysterious thing that was taking place. It was just like, I was already kind of in this whirlwind of like, why is Spirit having me quit my job, and what is actually happening? And then it just was like boom, boom, boom. Obviously, I now understand that had I never quit my job, I never would have met this business coach. Meetings with him was a pretty penny. So my boss, why would she ever, pay for me to meet with him? That wasn't necessary. So I never would have met this person, let alone spent multiple hours speaking with this person in order for him to, check a vibe that I'm somebody who would get on well with his brother. So I don't even know if that first night I realized like the pieces or the dots there. But I just was like, okay, something is happening, something is unfolding, and it's intense. So Saturday, I remember getting my hair done, and I remember I was like in Tony and Guy salon, like in the mall in Scottsdale. And I just remember the hairstylist saying, "Oh, do you have any fun plans this weekend?" I was like, "I'm going on a blind date tomorrow." And I remember, again, I did not know this woman. I remember her stopping and looking into the mirror and at my reflection, looking at me and saying, "Oh, he's the one." And I was just like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? Mind you, I had heard this person's voice, I knew their name, never seen a photo, didn't know anything about them. And I'm just like, the universe, I'm like, this is like, what's it called? Arranged marriage by the universe. And I don't know what this person looks like or anything about them. It was wild. Thankfully, the business coach was very good looking. So I was like, okay, we're good here, because, if they're brothers, then hopefully he's just as good looking. So, another wild thing is, I think it was like Sunday. So we were getting together Sunday evening. Sunday morning, I went to brunch with a girlfriend. And again, I told her the crazy story. And she was just like, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going on a blind date," not telling her like everything that lined up or like all of the weird messages that I was getting from people. And I just remember her saying, like, because she knew I had a one-way ticket home to Alaska, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm going on a blind date randomly a week before I'm leaving." And she goes, "Oh yeah," she was like, "This guy's gonna ground you. You're like trying to be this hot air balloon and like fly away, and like he's gonna bring you right back down to the ground." And I was just like, oh my gosh. So the build up to this blind date was like more than I could handle. But anyways, I can't even tell this story. I'm getting like hot and sweaty and my heart is racing. I feel like I'm gonna vomit. But I'm just like reliving it. So I drive up and I see him. I don't even know why I knew it was him, because I never saw a photo of him before we got together. So I remember driving up, I guess it was just like soul recognition, and also he met me outside of a restaurant in this beautiful highball Victory motorcycle. Anyways, so he was gorgeous, and I was smitten. And we walk in the restaurant, and right as our behinds were hitting the seats, the first thing he says before I even like sit and look up at him, he says, "I have a 12-year-old son." And I just remember looking up and being like, can I take any more like surprises from the universe? Can I take any more like love in my heart in this moment? Like, I felt like I was going to burst in that moment, because it was just like, I'm meeting the love of my life right now. And it's a twofer. It's a 2-for-1 special. Like, there's another soulmate like waiting at home. I couldn't even believe it. And it was just like this intense feeling of unconditional love. It was interesting because when I was having all of these feelings leading up to meeting him, and when I saw him, it was like this like love at first sight moment. It was this knowingness that this was my life partner. But it was so interesting because there was this excitement of who he is, the mystery behind who is this person that I'm going to spend my life with and get to know over the years as we age together. But it was so weird because when he said, "I have a 12-year-old son," it was like, that's my son. Like, that's my soulmate. And it was just like, I don't know. It was like I knew him. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was like one of the best things I've ever heard in the world. So we have a wonderful date, and we were like shutting the place down, the restaurant, just like talking. We pretty much said in that first date, like, oh yeah, we're destined soulmates. Like, everything was clicking, everything was lining up. All of our values, a lot of our life experiences, just everything was clicking. And so as time passes, he said, "Hey, I don't want this conversation to end. I live down the street, no funny business, but would you like to come back?" And he literally said that. He's such a gentleman. He was like, "No funny business, but do you want to come to my place and we'll continue this conversation?" And so we go back to his place, and I walk into his apartment. And mind you, my husband has blue eyes and like light brown, light sandy brown hair, like almost like really light colored. And so we walk in, and I see this adorable picture of his son as a toddler on his kitchen counter. And I see it immediately when I walk in, and it's a little toddler boy with brown eyes and brown hair. And it just stops me dead in my tracks, because I said, "Is that your son?" Because I was just thinking like, oh, maybe it's a new frame and it's like a cute baby picture of another kid, or like maybe it's somebody else, because like it did not look like Kevin. And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, so I have something to tell you. As if this date couldn't get crazier. So I'm 24 at the time with meeting Kevin. When I was 12 years old, I had a really intense dream where I woke up. In my dream, I was holding a brown-eyed, brown-haired. Well, it was a newborn baby, so just the brown eyes, I remember. But it had like little, a little bit of hair, and it was brown. But when I was 12 years old, I had a dream that I was holding this brown-eyed baby boy. And when I woke up, it was a very strange sensation, because again, I'm 12 years old. My priorities and my feelings and my psyche and my sensations as a 12-year-old, it's not computing with what I was experiencing in my dream. And I remember waking up almost like as like an adult woman holding a baby, looking for that baby again, but then it like dissipating, and then me coming back to like my 12-year-old self. And then I remember it caused such like an imprint, like it was so moving and intense for me. I remember, sharing it with my mom and my sisters and proclaiming like, oh, I'm going to marry somebody with dark hair and dark eyes because I'm going to have a son who has brown eyes and brown hair. And it was very intense for me. And throughout my life, I dreamt of this little brown-eyed, brown-haired boy one or two more times that I recall. And he was always aging, right? And so again, I just was like, oh, I'm going to have, there's my son, like, waiting for me, and I'm going to marry somebody who's, has darker complexion and have this son. So, it wasn't something that I always thought of. It was something that happened, and then it was kind of like compartmentalized. And so when I meet Kevin and then I come in and anyways, I basically blurted out to Kevin on our first day. I was like, well, I have something to tell you. I've been dreaming about him since I was 12 years old. And it was this crazy experience. Just that in and of itself was crazy because yes, when I sat down and he said, I have a 12-year-old son, it was like, oh, that's my son. But I wasn't thinking, oh, that's the son, that's the baby boy that I had been dreaming of. It was so wild. So then for that to come full circle and for it to loop back around and see, oh, that's the little boy. And then in that moment, it's like, oh my gosh, like this whole time I thought I was going to give birth to this boy. And, anyways, it was shocking. And so I remember telling him the story and Kevin and I figuring out that I was 24 at the time. And my first dream of him was when I was 12 and he's 12, And so, 24 minus him being a 12-year-old, I was 12. And so I dreamt of him when my husband and our son's wonderful mother, like, had him. And they were wonderful, courageous, brave teen parents. And so, it filled me with so much joy and gratitude to even have shared in that beauty of him coming into this earth and into their lives prior to me being able to enter his life. So it just was magic. It made the experience even more magical. So that was literally the first night we met, and I told him that, and he didn't think I was a crazy weirdo. And that was crazy because I felt totally weird in that moment, but he made me feel super comfortable. And my husband has like just as many crazy psychic stories as I do. So I think we're just two peas in a pod that way. And so here's where it continues to get interesting and another mind-blowing instance. So we finish up chatting, it's getting late. I drive home, and of course, as you do in 2013, you go home and you look him up on Facebook now that you have his full name. And I looked him up, and I'm looking just to get like more information about him because it was just like I couldn't get enough. I was just so excited to be meeting this man that I was going to get to know for the rest of my life. So I don't know if they still do this on Facebook, but back in the day when you would go to someone's page, it would show you like examples of 5 of their friends. So I open up my phone and I find his Facebook page and I click on it. And the first friend that is in his like 5 recommended friends or 5 friends of Kevin, the first person is the man, the sidewalk prophet, the man who told me I would meet a man one day, it would be the best relationship of my life. And I was like, that's the guy. Oh my gosh. And so I'm like freaking out. So Kevin and I had made plans to get together again the following night. So the whole day at work, like we're texting and talking, but like I want to wait till we're in person to like ask him about him and say something. And so I get done with work and I get ready, go over to his place, and I'm like, hey, how do you know so-and-so? And he was like, what do you mean? He's like, how do you know so-and-so? And I was like, I creeped on your Facebook and saw that you're friends with so and so, and like, I need to know how you know so and so. And he was like, oh, my brother was his pastor in New York, and he officiated, his wedding to his wife. And um, when my brother moved back out to Arizona, they stayed in touch, and they wanted to come out to Arizona. Him and his wife wanted to come out to Arizona to check it out. And so my brother linked them up with me to see how I could, help them out. And he was like, I let them live with me for like 3 to 4 months while they were getting on their feet. And yeah, that's how I know them. They're great people. And I was like, okay. And so I tell him what happened, and we're both just like crying. Like my husband's like eyes are like tearing up. And he was like, because I'm basically explaining to him, like, I was going through stuff, and that literally changed my life. Like, what he said to me changed the entire trajectory of my life, and it brought me to you. And we're like tearing up, and he was like, when they were moving out, they said to me, like, someday we will like repay you, and like for your kindness, and for opening your home to us. And they, like, my husband didn't even know them. He was just like, oh yeah, come stay with me, before they came out. And so he was just like they've done more than enough, like that, like they like that's it, like they brought you to me. And it was just like this beautiful moment. And turns out, this is ridiculous, like this is like cherry on top, but Kevin then mentions, he's like, you know what they do for work, right? And I was like, no. And he's like, they're like world traveling, world renowned wedding photographers. And so they very graciously photographed our very small, intimate wedding that we had in the woods with some close friends and family. And then we asked them to be the witnesses at our wedding. So that was really special and sweet. Yeah, so that is the story of how I called in, manifested, met my husband. And I just want to share with this story that two things, as I've been thinking about like sharing this story and why I want to share this story. Number one, I love this story. I could tell it all the time, and now I have it recorded for our children, and I love hearing other people's love stories. So hopefully this is something that you've enjoyed. And all love in the universe is something that we can all share in. So I hope this tickles you as much as it has tickled me in my life. But in processing Sharon, I also have felt like, yeah, there's two takeaways for me. There's being open to being spirit led, and also knowing that through difficult experiences and hardships, when we choose to grow from them, like good things come. So, the feeling of, my first attempt at marriage was, I had met him in high school. We didn't date in high school, but I loved him dearly. I cared for him dearly. And so it was so hard and quite traumatizing to go through that experience. But it was a catalyst for me to really look at what I was attracting in my life, and how I was behaving as well. And so to be able to choose to grow from that, and then also obviously a lot of divine intervention as well from the universe and from other people being spirit led to say certain things and do certain things. And there's so much more to the story. I'm giving you, like, if you can believe it, the brief synopsis, but there were so many other things along the way that really allowed for me to align with calling in my partner. And, his side of the story, he has just as many, like a very mirror image story of coming together with me. So yeah, if I could offer anything, if you're looking for that ultimate soulmate partner, really understanding that you are the one that deserves to be experiencing life to the fullest and in the healthiest way possible. And it's all an inside job, because if your divine destiny is to be with another person, you share that divine destiny, but sometimes you have to work certain things out on a human level to have that kind of antenna of divine destiny, get stronger and stronger and stronger. So the more you work on yourself and the more you get clear on who you are and what you're here to do, and your own soul connection, and how your soul is perfect, whole, and complete, and you are perfect, whole, and complete in yourself, and that true soulmates don't complete one another, they complement each other and they co-create together. And so there was a lot of healing and processing of both codependency, but also just optimizing my physical health and well-being. And there were just so many elements that led me to being open to sending out this kind of frequency to then attract in my partner. And then the second aspect is really allowing yourself to be spirit-led and to follow your heart versus your head. Because again, it was my dream job. I was enjoying living the area that I was living. But, allowing your heart to override your head sometimes is good in certain instances. I think it's really important to not demonize the mind, not demonize the ego, because there is a certain primal instinctual survival, voice that we need to listen to. However, when spirit comes in, I call it like a soul rush in moment, where it's like there's no denying it. And even the mind like bows down to it. And that's where I know, and that's what I ask for from the universe, is like, if you want me to really pursue having my heart override my head, then I humbly ask for a soul rush in moment where it's just like, yes, I will, still the mind and follow this, because this soul rush in moment is so intense. And so I invite you to follow your soul's rush in moments, and I am so grateful for sharing my story and for sharing this love with you. And I hope this brings you opportunity to reflect on your love story, not just with a romantic partner, but just love stories with meeting soulmates in general. I think it's one of my favorite life experiences, next to chocolate and swimming in the ocean. But my favorite life experiences are the soulmates, pets, friends, family, my partner, my soulmate son, our daughter. I love meeting soulmates. I love my clients. I have so many soulmate clients, and you, perhaps you. So yeah, reflect on your soulmate stories. It's a beautiful part of life, a beautiful part of coming here, to be able to hug our soulmates here and to hold them for a time. And I'm so grateful. So yeah, thanks for listening, and please follow along. I'm having so much fun making these videos and sharing stories and connecting with light workers all over the world. It's been such a wonderful part of my life to read for light workers all over the world, and now I'm hoping to open my heart and my light in this way to other light workers, and network with more light workers around the world at this time. So thank you so much for watching. Many blessings, and I'll see you in the next video.